going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year. We are already in February and I'm going to be doing a Tiny Dreamer year in review for 2024. So join me as we go through month by month and I talk about each thing that happened throughout the year. So let's get into it because there is a lot that happened last year. All right, let's start with January. Now, of course, you know I'm in West Tennessee and I thought it wasn't going to be getting so cold here, but it did. It actually snowed quite a bit here, more than the 1 inch that Google said was the average that Tennessee snowed per year. But that's okay, we took care of everything. I chose to keep the chickens warm by putting up some of their feed bags along the outside of their run so that this could keep some of the winds away. And last but not least, I had a guest staying and the tiny house pipes froze. Now this was an Airbnb guest, so I needed to do something ASAP to resolve this. So after he left, I heat taped the pipes and that is when my pipes thawed. It got to be 10 degrees and below, and that is exactly why I needed to heat tape them. I had been here for 3 years and I still had not heat taped the pipes and still hadn't put skirting on, so these are things that we had to get done this year. I believe 7 or 8 fruit trees. Now, part of the reason why I'm doing this now is because they are going to take a good 7 to 10 years to start fruiting. So why not get them in the ground now and start my food forest on my property, which is what I've been planning to do since the beginning. I also planted fruit bushes, which was blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries, elderberries. And one of the things I noticed was that while I was weed eating a section of my property, I came across a whole big area where there was brambles. Now, brambles are some of the fruit bushes that I planted, but they weren't the fruit bushes that I planted. They were growing wild on my property, so there's about 25 raspberry bushes that are in this one little section. Raspberry and blackberry bushes. So pretty much I did not need to plant those fruit bushes, but it is what it is. Hopefully those will also develop some fruit eventually, and they might take a while, but at least we will have some fruit on our property. February is also when I got a bunch of scrap lumber from my friends, and including the handyman that I hire. They gave me a bunch of free scrap lumber and I was going to start using this lumber to build my gardens. I also started composting in February. I did buy a tumbler and I started putting my fruits, vegetables, all of my scraps from cooking into this compost tumbler. It is unlike the mulch pile that I have outside of the chicken coop, so I do not add any chicken poop to this or fire pit ash, but this compost tumbler does have fruits, vegetables, tea, just scraps from eating, as well as leaves from the ground. That's basically all I'm putting in the round tumbler. The mulch pit is also basically compost, but that has to be mixed for a whole year because it does have chicken poop in it. So we're going to be using those on the gardens. This is the first year that I'm composting in a tumbler, so we'll see how that soil works out and exactly what I'll be using it for. 2024 is when I also cut a leaning tree down in my RV section. So there was a leaning tree and I didn't want the weather to knock it over and risk hitting one of the RVs that might have been staying. So we decided to get the chainsaw out and cut that down. This is the first tree I have ever cut down and I did have a couple problems doing it. If you guys want to check out that video, check it out right there. The chainsaw got stuck because I didn't know the angle of how to cut the tree, but we powered through it. The tree is down and I know a little bit more now about how to cut down a tree. Moving into March, this is when I prepped a new garden area for 2024. My old garden area, which was basically ground gardens, didn't really work out in the year 2023, so I planned on creating new gardens in 2024. So I mapped it all out on paper, how I was going to do it. I laid down tarp for the entire bottom flooring so that when I put the cardboard in and the dirt in and created these gardens, that everything was going to have a nice surface. I just wanted to learn from 2023's gardens, so that's what March was basically prepping for these gardens. I also got 10 new chicks in March, and one of the reasons why I did this was because I found that in the winter, the 11 chicks that I had weren't laying enough. They had basically gotten down to only 2 or 3 eggs per day, and sometimes this was not enough to accommodate the 6 farm fresh eggs that I leave for the Airbnb guests in the tiny house in their welcome basket. So I kind of panicked and was like, what else am I supposed to do? I'm not going to buy them store-bought eggs and replace them with that. So the next best step was to get 10 more chicks and make them a part of the family. Still in March, now is the time to clean up the old gardens and finally get to building these new gardens now that I have this new section built up. So cleaned out the old gardens, got all the brush out of there, and then ended up using the scrap lumber from the Friends to build raised gardens to put on top of the tarp that was the flooring for the whole new garden section. A lot of these gardens were double layered, so I would take 2 pieces of wood, stack them up, just so I can fill a section of a garden area. I found that when planting in the ground, there was too many weeds. Now, mind you, there are still weeds when you build a raised garden, but it's a little bit less because of the way that you create them. In March, my chicken Shelby, she was the head hen. She had water belly and I had to drain it. This was the first time I drained a chicken's belly from the fluid. It was pretty gross, I'm not gonna lie, but it helped make her stay alive for 2 more months, so I'm grateful for that. And we were just going to see how long she was going to hold out. She did start pepping up and acting better, eating better, and just being her normal self again after the fluid was pulled off her belly. Now we're moving into April and I'm still raising the new chicks. They are a pleasure to have around and even the cats love them. So in a few months I will be able to put them outside and they will get to know the other chickens. April is also when I got 2 huge loads of wood chips delivered to my property by my friends. They used their truck and I got the wood chips for free. These wood chips were going to be used for the garden paths and the wildflower garden paths, as well as any area around the homestead that needed a proper walkway as opposed to the muddy dirt that was underneath caused by the weather. This is also when I got about 50 to 60 wooden stakes, and I was going to use these stakes to create a fence around the new garden area as well as the old garden area. And learning from the year 2023 in those gardens, I did get thicker wood stakes, and they have held up a lot better than the year 2023's wood stakes held up because they're actually falling apart, so we're probably gonna have to replace those too. Moving into this is when I put those wood chips in the garden paths, and once I started putting up the produce gardens, I put all of the wood chips over that tarp that was already there, put the gardens over the tarp, and now these wood chips are in the pathways of the gardens, making it a lot easier for me to walk and get in there rather than having a bunch of weeds grow up while I'm trying to garden. So last month is when I got the wood stakes, and this month of May is when I put up the plastic fencing that goes around connected to the wood stakes. So this was all a process. If you guys want to watch that video, check it out right there. And in May, unfortunately, my head hen Shelby, she did pass away. Her water belly came back 2 months after I first drained her belly, and it ended up coming back and she passed away 2 months later. So rest in peace, Shelby. This is when Hazel, the next head in line after Shelby, she became the head hen. Going into June, this is when I put the wood chips in the rest of the wildflower paths and did the front section of the wildflower paths and the back section of the wildflower paths. There is one walkway area that did not get wood chips. I ran out before I could fill that, so either I'll be getting more or I could just leave it plain and blank, but I do want to end up getting wood chips for that section, so we will see about getting that done. Also, this is when the new chicks who I have already put into the introductory pen inside the chicken coop were now introduced to my chickens. They were 11 or 12 chickens, a couple from the original set, 10 from the year of 2023, and now 10 more from the year 2024. And quite surprisingly, all of the chickens are getting along. I feel now that there are 22 chickens at this point in time, it was just a really great introduction. I thought it was going to go a lot worse than it did, but it didn't. So I am so grateful for that. And hopefully in the year 2025, I won't be getting more chickens, but you never know because chicken math. Now that we are in July, I decided to make a pumpkin trellis. Now my plants have already been planted in all of the gardens, and pretty soon they're going to be starting to grow up, and pumpkins actually trellis up. So I wanted to build a DIY trellis, and that's what I did. I built it out of sticks and branches from around the homestead. I had my best friend Dave help me. Thank you, Dave. And we got the pumpkin trellis up. And when the pumpkins started growing, they actually had a place to grow onto rather than sprawling all over the ground. July is also the time where I prepped the tiny house and the property for tiny home tours to come do a tour of my tiny house and property. So after the preparation, we are going to be ready for them to come in August. Now that we are in August, Tiny Home Tours came to do a tour of my tiny house, and that was a really great experience. They were staying in an RV, so I had them stay in one of my RV spots, and they were able to spend the night and do the tour at their leisure. And it was just really fun working with them. I'm going to be linking that video in the description below, and please do go subscribe to their channel and follow them on social media. They do this to vans, buses, tiny houses, cabins, so they do all tiny things, and it's a pretty cool channel, so do check them out. August is also when I stopped feeding the new chicks their grower feed, so there's a specific amount of time that chicks get certain foods, and this is the time when we take them off the grower feed and put them on laying feed so that they can start laying eggs. Pretty soon they're going to start laying, which is really exciting because I needed more eggs. In August, unfortunately, my new head hen, which was now Hazel, she also passed away. She had something that was, I don't really know what she had, but she wasn't feeling well. I really didn't know what to do to help her, and she did end up passing away, which now passed the responsibility on to my last OG chicken, which is Darcy. She is the last original chicken that I had from a couple years ago, and now there is 21 chickens. Unfortunately, one of the new chicks also died, and this was when they were in their introductory pen, but Elodie died. I don't know how it happened. I don't know how it happened. So I think that she may have had coccidiosis. I'm not sure though. I don't think she was bit by a snake because the other chicks were still alive. So I did put her in the woods so that other predators could come and take her, but she was a young chick, and it was confusing to me how she did not make it. So now we are at 20 chickens. Also in August, I decided to build an extra mulch pit, compost pit pile inside the garden area because when it comes time for the winter, I'm going to be using this dirt to top off all of the gardens and cover them up so that they could be winterized and I could then start to use them again in the spring. Now we are in September and it's getting a little bit colder, so this is when I chose to move all of my porch plants, which were on DIY racks that I bought from, I believe, Amazon. I brought all of those in and I created a mini greenhouse in my mobile home small bedroom. Now there were 3 sets of racks and this held about 40 to 50 different lemon plants, and I didn't want these lemon plants to die out in the cold, so that's why I brought them in. Now in September I also made 2 mini greenhouses to put in my small bedroom in the mobile home. This is where I'm going to be sowing my seeds for the year 2025. I wanted a better setup than I did in 2024 because it just did not work out in 2024, nor did it work out in 2023 because I had them all in the small bedroom closet. So now that we have these 2 mini greenhouses, they each have 4 different racks. I purchased heat mats for all of the racks and I purchased lights for all of the racks to put above the seedlings that are growing. So hopefully with this new setup that we're going to be starting in 2025 is going to be a winner, and you guys will definitely see the progress of all of that happen. Now we are in October of 2024 and I decided to invest in some red sand to put in the chicken coop. Now one of the reasons why I did this was because the horse pellets that I was using, when that gets hit with water, it ends up making it into a dusty, broken up, I don't know what it is. So it's very dusty in the chicken coop, and I researched that sand is helpful for keeping the dust away. So I had one of my friends deliver a load of this red sand. I believe it only cost me $200 or less. And when I did put this in the chicken coop, I did have an entire second layer that I was able to put in. So I did put about a 6-inch layer in there, but I only put half of it in there. So if I do need more, I could always use that second half on top of what is already in there. October is also when I got so desperate to have these weeds out of the gravel paths that I chose to hire my friend to spray the paths with herbicide. Now, normally I am against herbicides and pesticides, but I was so desperate because the gravel paths had been taken over by these weeds. I'm sure that my Airbnb guests couldn't even find the paths to walk on. I could barely find the paths to walk on, and the salt that I tried the year before, it just did not work, so I didn't want to go that route again, and I didn't know what else to do. Until I can buy a whole new second layer of gravel rocks to put on all of that, which is about $3,500, I needed something to do in the meantime while saving that money. So I did hire my friend, and if anything, I will do it every month, maybe once a month, until I find another option, or if I get that money to put another layer of rocks on there, which isn't really going to help because the weeds are going to go through that too. October is also when I put together a utility cabinet, and this is because of me making that mobile home bedroom, the small bedroom, into a greenhouse. All of the stuff that I used to remodel the mobile home with was just sitting in a corner. I had no place to put it. Now, one would think that you could put it in a workshop or garage, and I do have one, but every time I do that and I then go to use these products again, they're hard, they're cold, and they're dry. So I didn't want to ruin any more of my stuff, so I got a cabinet for inside the mobile home to house any maintenance or repair or remodel stuff for either the tiny house or the mobile home. Now we're moving into November, and this is when I stained and sealed the tiny house deck. This has been in the works because I had the deck put up a couple years ago and had not gotten around to staining it or sealing it. And one of the reasons why is because the handyman used wood on the deck, but had to buy new wood for at least 4 or 5 of those boards. So the old wood looked different from the new wood, and I was just waiting for the new wood to basically weather a little bit and turn into the color of the used wood before I actually put the stain on. So that's what I did. Waited until they kind of color coordinated with each other, stained the tiny house deck, and then sealed the tiny house deck with Thompson's water seal. November is also when I cleaned up the yard around the tiny house because my friends and I were going to put up skirting. So that moved me into the skirting project. I did have 3 friends help on the skirting project, and after not having skirting on the tiny house for 3 years, living in Tennessee, it is now finally up, and hopefully the guests that stay in the tiny house will be warmer. Hopefully the pipes won't freeze, and it will definitely keep the inside of the tiny house warmer because that area under there has been blocked off. We did framing with 2x4s, and then we put plywood against that, and then we used pallet wood vertically around the whole entire tiny house. Now we are in December, and I do have a guest staying for 42 days. So they started staying on November 30th, and their checkout date is January 11th. So this allowed me to do a bunch of projects that I've been meaning to get done, and having to clean after each guest wasn't getting in the way. So now that I had this long-term guest staying, they're fine in the tiny house, and I don't have to tend to them as much. So I was able to just focus on everything that I needed to get done. This is when I stained the tiny house skirting that we just put up, as well as sealed the tiny house skirting. And I actually did this before the guest arrived. The guest did arrive 15 days late, and this was because they had an emergency at home that they had to turn around. That gave me an extra 15 days to stain and seal the skirting. So I got that done before he arrived, thank goodness. And now hopefully the tiny house is completely winterized for the guests to be more comfortable. This is also the month where I chose to clean up the gardens. I decided not to do this in the spring because I did realize that when I did this last year, I did it in the spring, actually did it the spring of 2024, cleaned it up so that all of the animals and insects could hibernate inside the gardens. This year, I did not want to do that. And one of the reasons why I did this is because I wanted to prep the gardens for the year 2025 and not have to deal with taking out all of those old plants. The insects and the wildlife can hibernate somewhere else. I've got plenty of greenery around the property that they can, overwinter, and I just wanted my gardens to be prepared for 2025. And last but not least, December is also the month that I cleaned up the front mobile home garden. This is the first year that I have done this because I was trying to let the insects and just the wildlife have a place to overwinter, but each year that I let that go by, all of the dead stuff just stays in there, and I never get a chance to pull it all out before all of the new stuff starts growing up within all of that dead stuff. So you've got all of this dead stuff taking up root room for the new plants to grow, and the new plants are trying to fight with these old plants. So we just cleaned it all up, and we're getting it prepared for the year 2025. So that was Tiny Dreamer Year in Review 2024. It's been a lot of gardening, a lot of chicken stuff that we were handling, and I absolutely love it. I'm sure the year 2025 is also going to be filled with lots of gardening stuff and produce and more projects, so stay tuned for that. If you guys liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and click the notifications bell so you can receive a notification every time I post a new video, which is every Sunday. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy New Year! I decided to... So March is when I... Don't put any... In March, I had my... Don't put that. In March, I also have... Don't put that. And this is the time when... And of course, now they have all named... Don't put that. Because... Just because. Eggs in every single... Don't put that. This is when Hazel became the... Don't put that. They came here in their RV and they stayed. Don't put that. I don't know what you call it. Torch. Don't put that. And are growing up. We're having a pleasure raising them. Don't put that. So last month is when I got the wood stakes. Now this is something that I would have done in 20... Don't put that either. I've been so desperate to get these gravel. Don't put that. The tiny house. Don't put that. Now we're in December and I got a surprise. Don't put that. Have all of those weeds grow up. Don't put that.